Welcome back to the Cauldron of Curiosities. I've been having a chat with my friend ChatGPT because I was reading the book Mad Honey, and it's a joint combination of authors with Jodi Picoult and another lady called Jennifer, who I hadn't come across before. But the story made me think about the fact that we often see people being blackballed or shamed when something has happened because they've been accused but they haven't been proven guilty. So what's going on there? So I wanted to explore this because there's a number of different books which have explored where people have been wrongfully accused and what the outcome of that has been. But it's the fallout, isn't it, on the families? But I wanted to go, so why do we say innocent until proven guilty if it doesn't really exist? Does the principle truly exist in society beyond the textbooks and courtrooms? Legally, the presumption of innocence is clear. Article 6.2 of the European Convention on Human Rights states, "Everyone charged with a criminal offence shall be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to law." This was echoed in one of the most famous English cases, Wilmington versus DPP 1935. In his judgment, Viscount Sankey described it as, "Throughout the web of the English criminal law, one golden thread is always to be seen. That is the duty of the prosecution to prove the prisoner's guilt, no matter what the charge or where the trial is. The principle that the prosecution must prove the guilt of a prisoner is part of the common law of England, and no attempt to whittle it down can be entertained." So, on paper, the principle is sacrosanct, but in practice, it often frays. There are times when the presumption of innocence shields the accused, protecting them from wrongful conviction, but the cracks are most visible in real cases, especially the ones we found in the UK. Cases of failure and miscarriage. One example is Sally Clark, a solicitor wrongly convicted of murdering her 2 infant sons. At her appeal, the Court of Appeal said plainly, "We have no doubt that the resulting convictions are, therefore, unsafe and must be quashed." They also called the failure to disclose vital medical evidence wholly unacceptable, yet by the time she was cleared, the damage to her reputation, career, and mental health was irreversible. Then there's Angela Cannings. She was convicted on disputed medical testimony. And Andrew Evans, who served 25 years in prison after a false confession. What about Victor Nealon? Cleared after 17 years when DNA proved his innocence. Nealon's case went all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, but in 2024 the court found that refusing him compensation didn't legally breach the presumption of innocence. The court held that the refusal of compensation under the UK statutory scheme did not amount to attributing criminal guilt to people whose convictions have been quashed. In other words, you can be legally innocent, but still not innocent enough to get the compensation for having been wrongly accused. Not on, is it? Now we have Andrew Melkinson. He was wrongly convicted of rape and spent 17 years behind bars before DNA cleared him. His case highlighted how majority verdicts, where not all the jurors agree, can facilitate the miscarriage of justice. And the research shows that at least 56 wrongful convictions in England and Wales involved majority verdicts. So there's a bit of bullying going on there, possibly. Add to that case where media prejudice derailed the fairness, like the Taylor sisters' wrongful conviction in 1991, overturned after tabloid bias, or the collapsed trial of Leeds United, Woodgate and Bowyer in 2001, and you can see how easily the presumption of innocence is undermined. Rumour and social pressure have a lot to answer for. Outside the courtroom, rumour is even more corrosive. A whisper on social media, a tabloid headline, and suddenly a person is guilty in the public eye. Even when they're cleared, their reputations rarely recover. Think of a teacher falsely accused after a social media post went viral. No evidence, no testimony, just a rumour. She was suspended, ostracised, and only later exonerated when they realised there was no evidence. And people realised that maybe they hadn't recalled it correctly. But the presumption of innocence had evaporated. Juries who are sworn to uphold fairness are vulnerable to bias and group dynamics. Studies show juries herd towards the confident voices, or they overtrust the forensic evidence. And judges can also pressure them with what's called a dynamite charge, pushing for a consensus, even when jurors still have doubts. So even in the jury box, the golden thread of presumption can be tugged loose. There is a folklore parallel, because you're going, what's a folklore explorer doing down here? This is not a modern dilemma. Folklore warns of the false accusation too. The 3 golden children, where jealous relatives accuse the queen of terrible deeds, and she's punished while innocent, and only years later is the truth revealed. It's a tale as old as time. Rumour travels faster than fact, and innocence often requires extraordinary proof. So does being innocent until proven guilty really exist? Legally, yes. We have the golden thread. Socially, no. The thread, it frays under rumour, media pressure, flawed evidence and jury dynamics. And perhaps the final word should go back to Wilmington versus DPP, because if we forget, we risk losing the very foundation of justice. No attempt to whittle it down can be entertained. Thank you for joining me today. If you've got thoughts or experience about presumption of innocence, Do share them with me via the hashtag of Presumed Innocent. Until then, I'm Sarah, reminding you that justice depends not just on verdicts, but on how we treat one another before the verdict is ever reached. I look forward to speaking to you again when we publish the podcast on each Thursday. The Cauldron of Curiosities is out. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cauldron of Curiosities. If you enjoyed this dip into folklore, don't forget to follow the podcast, share it with a friend, and keep your lantern handy for the next curious tale.